Conversations across time, 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 across time.
Here are some of the thoughts from some of the others we talked to just a few minutes ago.
Has to happen.
I hope change happens, and I hope we don't keep regressing as we have been doing. Listen to what the people need and what the people want, because they're currently not representing the people.
The struggles are interconnected. We know that there has been a bit of a backslide as of recently when it comes to rights for multiple groups of people, but particularly today with women, there is no reason why women should not have the right to be able to do what they need to with their bodies and not have to explain it to somebody else.
We're going back to a time that's half a century ago, and we shouldn't be looking back, we should be looking forward.
Most Supreme Court decisions are granular, little noticed interpretations of the law and Constitution, but a few are landmarks. Roe v. Wade was a landmark. It effectively legalized abortion across the United States. Here are the facts and players in the case. Jane Roe was actually Norma McCorvey. She was a Texan in her early 20s who wanted to terminate an unwanted pregnancy in 1969. Abortion was legal in Texas at the time, but only for the purpose of saving a woman's life. That was not the issue for McCorvey. Her life was not at risk. She tried unsuccessfully to get an illegal abortion and was referred to 2 attorneys interested in challenging anti-abortion laws. The Wade in Roe v. Wade was Henry Wade, the district attorney of Dallas County, who enforced that Texas abortion law. McCorvey soon filed a case against him. The Supreme Court agreed in 1971 to hear the case, and on January 22, 1973, struck down the Texas law in a 7-2 decision. Justice Harry Blackmun wrote for the majority opinion and declared a woman's right to privacy under the 14th Amendment superseded a state's right to ban abortion. The court set different rules for each trimester. In the first trimester, the choice to end pregnancy was entirely up to the mother. In the second trimester, the government could regulate but not ban abortion in order to protect.
Hi, everybody. What I'd like to do is explain the recent abortion decision by the Supreme Court of the United States in the case of Dobbs. Let me explain a little bit of the history. Approximately 50 years ago, the Supreme Court stated that abortion was a right that every woman had. They had the right to get an abortion. This right was based not on a specific instance of, not a specific line of the Constitution, but an implied right in the Constitution that had been decided in a case before the Roe versus Wade case 50 years ago called Griswold. Griswold was a case about contraceptive devices being banned. And what the Supreme Court said in that case is that a state cannot ban contraceptive devices because that was part of the right of privacy of an individual, their health right of privacy, which was implied in a number of amendments to the Constitution, but most specifically in the 14th Due Process Clause addition to the Constitution, the amendment to the Constitution. 50 years after Roe, in the Dobbs case, the Supreme Court, led by a group of right-wing Republican extremists that had been appointed not only during the Trump administration, but previous to that, decided to overturn the Roe decision and state that abortion was not constitutionally granted. Now, they didn't say that abortion was a crime. They didn't say abortion couldn't be had, but they said it was up to the people and not to the courts to decide whether abortion would be a right. That meant that it would go back to the state legislatures or perhaps even the federal government to decide by legislation whether or not abortion would be held in this country as a legal right. The the issue is complicated, but I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. Because they didn't outlaw abortion, it is up to the people. And what that means is, if you are in favor of it, as most people are in this country, then you have a right to change the law. The law in Pennsylvania presently allows for abortion, but the law in half the states in the country abolished the right to abortion and made it a crime. But the federal government can enact legislation to enable abortion. Now, how is this done? Very simply. You've heard me on many, many of these broadcasts say that if you have a problem with the political climate, then you have to get out and vote. And I am doubling down on that now, because that is what it's going to take to change this Dobbs decision in favor of the people who respect the right to get an abortion. Imagine, this was the first time in our history that the Supreme Court has taken a right away from individuals. This is not just a woman's issue. This is an issue for all people, because there are other cases that have been decided on the basis of this right of privacy. Cases like contraceptions, for instance, that I made reference to, and also the right to marry whoever you want to marry. And these cases are now subject to the whim of the presently appointed Supreme Court. So you have to get out and vote, and not just in presidential elections. Midterm elections are coming up and you have to vote here. And not just your vote, but you must have friends that you know are like-minded and maybe have not voted, who can vote and register to vote. Then you have to take those people and bring them along with you to vote. Everybody has to vote, and that's the way we'll be able to change things for the better in this country. Voting is what it's all about. I hope that explains this for everybody, and the rest of the show, I think, will even explain it further. Thank you very, very much for allowing me to make this presentation.
Sir, your originalism is being frayed.
It seems to be a matter of convenience. It seems to be a matter of convenience, because you keep discussing what the founding fathers meant and what was going on at the time of the founding of this country, except that you've completely overlooked Justice Blackmun's question as to all of the things that all of the events that we associate in memory from the revolution of 1776. I mean, everything from the Boston Tea Party, which was, of course, as you know, a revolt against taxation by the crown. So there's that. There's all of the standing at Bunker Hill. All of that would be treasonous acts, according to you.
That was against another state, and we recognize ourselves as a separate state. And treason is an act by a citizen of the state against the state in time of war.
I want to ask the lovely French feminist, who did he remind you of the monarchist in your France? Does he not?
Madame
the way he looks at women, the way he looks at the other people other than the aristocracy?
Absolutely. My goodness, Scalia. Let me tell you. You know, it's all about the men for you. Men this, men that, men everything. I I wish I could put you in one of my plays as a pompous. I'd
Yes,
love to. I'd love to cast you.
Oh, yes.
I'd love to cast you in one of my feminist plays. Let's get that started. Let's see how you like it up there being in the hot seat.
Yes, and may I remind you that the Ancien regime in France, the church dominated. The church was respected. The church had a role in the society and the state.
But
And
that
the
too is
revolutionary regime
authoritarianism.
oppressed the church. They
You're
took
back
away
to
church property.
your
They replaced the
authoritarian.
religious orders. And Robespierre had this ridiculous idea of the worship of the goddess of reason. And that's what your precious revolution has led to, Madame.
Precious revolution, yes, absolutely. It was to create equality, as you know, across the board for all women on all levels, on all playing fields. Why shouldn't we? Why? Tell me why. Just because you're birthing men and you're putting to men clothing and you have all the rules of the political freedom, why can't we? Why can't we, Scalia? What makes you so better than the next? And may I remind you, what sex birthed you? What brought you into this world? Who? Another man? I'd like to see that happen. Give us some credit
that's
here.
the function of women.
Give us some credit here.
I mean, you give birth to us, we'll give you that.
You'll give us that? You wouldn't be here if it wouldn't have been for your biological birthing mom. Don't we deserve something?
None of this transgender and gender neutral.
Okay, so no,
I want to talk about gender. Oh, we'll dive into that.
Because I was going to say that when it comes to a discussion about gender, let us talk about your spawn. And that's how I can read. Yes, your spawn. Meaning Justice Clarence Thomas and Justice Alito, your spawn.
Yes, I've influenced Clarence and Sam, and I'm very proud of the work I've done on the court. I birthed a whole generation of conservative justices for the court.
You gave birth. You gave birth to.
Yes, and I'm proud of
what is her name? Amy Comey Barrett. You gave birth to her.
Hey,
and her know nothingness, sitting on the highest court in the land, and sitting
Justice
in
Scalia, when you say you gave birth to these people, you're defending abortion.
A figure of speech, Justice.
Oh, wait, because that's maybe when abortion should have been used. The problem is that it's situational, and it's not just about women's rights. And you articulated it very well, and I think the audience and everyone on the panel knows what you're saying. You said that you talked about the aristocracy. You talked about the educated class. So you don't want people to have rights. It's not just women's rights you're against. You're against the rights of gay and trans people. You're against the rights of minorities. You're against the rights of people with different religions. So you really don't believe in the Constitution, sir.
No.
The Constitution doesn't deal with trans or gay or feminist or black, white, brown, green, whatever.
Really?
That's why I oppose affirmative action, because having a law specifically benefiting specifically one or another demographic group is wrong.
Well, it boggles my mind. What you're saying is that since the Constitution doesn't talk about trans, gay, it talks about black people in the three-fifths, that therefore they should have no rights.
That's right. That is
right. We know exactly where you stand. And that's where Uncle Thomas Clarence stands, and that's where Uncle Sammy Alito stands, and that's where the three new justices stand, and that's a crime against humanity.
And I must say this to you, Justice Scalia.
Yep.
When you talk about men being superior to women. One of the things that I wanted us to talk about is how this is seems to be on sand. It shifts according to needs. During World War II, for instance, women were relied upon, and Eleanor Roosevelt led the charge with that, to engage women in industry. And she said, because our hands are smaller, we would probably be better at some jobs than the men were.
Right.
So you men in authority seem to feel that they have rights, that they can give a right, they can extend a right, and then they can take it back. Because you know that the modern day feminist movement actually was a reaction to men who think like you, deciding after World War II that somehow these women who had been independent should return back to home and household duties.
Because that has always been their traditional function. And listen, I will give credit to the women who worked in the war industries during the war, while the men were in the trenches in combat, defending this country. But the war was over. It couldn't last forever. So the women did the responsible thing, returned to their homes, returned to their kids, returned to their husbands, returned the jobs to the men. That was the only right thing for them to do after the war ended.
But you see, it didn't work that way, did it? It didn't quite work out that way, did it?
Well, they were content to do it. They were content to go back to the kitchen.
And bake cookies all day?
I'd like
Are you
to ask
kidding me?
Attorney Madnick, Mr. Madnick, what can the people now that you're involved with, and you're still, I think, maybe semi-retired or practicing a little bit, what can the people do to counter what Justice Scalia and his ilk, Justice Alito and Thomas and Barrett, have done to this society? How can the people counter that?
There's nothing you can do.
I think what is safe to say is, as you are always on point to remind us, people have to get out and vote. The only way we overcome what Scalia and his spawn and this current madness that is sweeping the country, this neo fascism, the only way we overcome that is by voting. So Irv, I agree, and I do appreciate for you always getting us back to that main point. And I was going to ask for each of you if you had any final thoughts. So I'm going to start with Justice Blackmun. I'll start where I began with Justice Blackmun.
Yes, my decision, and I'm a conservative Republican, and my decision in Roe was based on the idea that the 14th Amendment and the Due Process and Equal Protection Clause extended privacy from the Fourth Amendment and other constitutional dictates to women and to everybody, not just women. The right to privacy would be for a 17-year-old. And the only time the right to privacy comes into conflict if it affects someone else's rights. So in terms of my decision, I even said that if the woman's right to have an abortion conflicted with, for example, a viable fetus, then you have to weigh those two things. It's not an absolute right. And the way Justice Scalia's offsprings ruled in this case, they didn't talk about the right to privacy so much. All they did was the original list that the founding fathers didn't think about abortion. If they thought about it, they would have put it in the Constitution. No, therefore, there's no such right. There's clauses in the Constitution that says things not enumerated for the federal government are left to the states or to the people therein. So therefore, there is a right to privacy, and that right's going to extend, and in the long run, that will win. It'll extend to gay people, it'll extend to interracial marriages, it'll extend to what people do in their bedroom. And in the short run, Scalia and his Federalist ilk have gained control. What Mr. Madnick said and what Ms. Crawford said, in the long run, it will happen and women will have their rights back.
Yes, Justice Blackmun.
I'm just curious, what rights that have been extended over the last 2 centuries and a half do you think were ill-gotten? For example, do you think that doing away with separate but equal was wrong? Do you think helping labor unions and working men using the Interstate Commerce Clause in the 14th Amendment is wrong? Would you go back to time before that when we had segregated schools, segregated restaurants, segregated buses, and would you go back to the time when workers were exploited?
You know perfectly well, Justice Blackmun, that all of our laws have its origins in English common law, and the right of privacy was specific.
I asked you specific questions. I asked you about
if a business wants to be a whites only, it is its prerogative.
So in other words, the sign color need not eat here was okay with you.
If a business, if a private entity wants to have its certain rules about who comes in and who can use its facilities, that is its prerogative.
So if you walked in with your crucifix and they told you we didn't serve Catholics, that would be all right with you.
The church had nothing to do with segregation.
Well, no, I said if you said the business has an absolute right to serve and not serve who they want to. Yes. I said if you walked in with your crucifix, which I know you wore, and they said we don't serve Catholics, that's okay with you.
Hey, there's always going to be some Catholics only restaurant.
I asked you, is that all right with you? That's all. It's a simple answer, yes or no. You were in court long enough. You were a proper prosecutor. It's a yes or no answer. Is that all right with you?
Hey, if they want to do that, fine.
Okay. All right. There's always we just want to know where you're at. That's all. That's fine.
Protestants and people of color, white and Protestant, those country clubs have an existence. That have excluded anyone who wasn't white or Protestant. Okay, we had our own clubs, we had our own facilities, our own schools.
So that's okay.
Hey,
so if you wanted to go to a non-Catholic parochial school and they said we don't admit Catholics, that's okay. Well, that's all you're saying. I'm just asking you. That's very simple. See, I don't believe in that. As conservative as I am, I believe the Constitution guarantees everyone rights, even your religion, even though I'm not Catholic, even though I believe that certain things the founding fathers were smart about. The fact is everybody deserves to be protected by the Constitution and to have equal rights. And that's what the 14th Amendment's all about. And I guess you're opposed to that because it talks about due process for everyone. And it talks about equal protection for everyone. It doesn't make an exception. Now, you guys interpret it, well, if it happened after the Civil War, and it must only mean to the slaves and it can't apply to women. That's BS. If they wanted to say that, they would have said it. They didn't say it directly in the 14th Amendment. It says everyone is entitled to due process, and what it basically does, it extends the Fifth Amendment rights to make sure the states have to enforce it, and therefore the states can't have Jim Crow laws. Therefore, the states can't have anti-gay laws. Therefore, the states can't have anti-interracial marriage laws. And that's basically what you're against.
You have to, of course, I see you forget the 10th Amendment, Justice Blackmun, which says that states that the
all powers not given to the federal government or denied to the government or given to the states or the people therein. I didn't forget it. I know it better than you do. All powers not given to the federal government or denied are given to the states and to the people therein. The people therein. Not the men therein, not the white people therein, the people therein.
It was understood in that era that it was men. It was understood it was nothing but men.
So on the one hand, you're an originalist that has to say it, but when it doesn't say it, you tell me it's understood. But when it comes to abortion or the women's rights or the right to privacy, you said it doesn't say it, therefore it can't be understood. But when you want it understood, then if it doesn't say it, you say it's understood. Well, yeah, that's great.
Justice Blackmun.
Yes.
You and I are of the same ethnic, actually the same racial and
social. Yeah, but I'm going to heaven and you're not.
Group that has dominated.
I went to heaven and you didn't.
And we have to maintain our dominance. And all these so-called minority groups are taking over, and we have to protect ourselves. And they're going to oppress us.
For someone that believes in the Constitution, and now you do all we have these minority groups, and we have to protect ourselves. I mean, I really don't know where you're going with this. I mean, even if you're an originalist, you do believe in certain fundamental rights. Do you believe in the right to worship as you please? Do you believe in the First Amendment? Do you believe in freedom of speech? I don't know what you believe in because you talk about the right of white males and nobody else has rights. I don't understand it.
Because that's what the authors of the Constitution wrote down.
They didn't write it down. I just said that the 10th Amendment doesn't say, and the men therein. It says the people therein. It doesn't say the men therein. You said, oh, you don't know the 10th Amendment, Justice Blackmun. I said, I know it better than you when I quoted it to you. And it says the people therein. It doesn't say the men therein. Then you say, well, it was understood the men. And then when you don't want it, when it's not there, you say, well, they never believed in that because they didn't put it in. You can't have it both ways. Either you're an originalist or you're not. You can't say I'm an originalist when it fits me and there's no word abortion in the Constitution, therefore there can't be an abortion. But when it doesn't say men, you say, well, it was understood they were all men and they dominated the culture. You can't do it that way.
Why not?
Because it's not what us justices are supposed to do. That's why not. We're not supposed to bring our own prejudice, our own upbringing, our own religious biases to the court decisions. We're supposed to rule on what the Constitution say and not make up stuff. And I cleaned that up.
Justice Blackmun, I'll admit that what I'm trying to do is try to restore some order in the country by...
That's not the role of the court. That's the role of the executive and the legislative branch. Our rule is the rule on the Constitution, the rights in the Constitution. If people have a right to free speech and you don't like the demonstration, you can't say, I'm going to do away with free speech. You can't do that. That's in there for a reason. And that's why I pointed out to you before about what would you say about the Sons of Liberty? What would you say about the Boston Tea Party? You skew history to fit yourself.
Conversation Conversations across time, 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 conversations.